Honestly, every town likes to think it's the exceptions. Like, yeah, bad things happens, but not here. Not to people like us. And I get that. I have caught myself thinking the same way more times than I would know to admit. It's comforting. It's comforting. It let you sleep a little easier at night. But then you come across a case like this one, and that illusion just cracks quality quickly at first. Quietly at first, and then all at once. What happened here was not chaotic. It was some desperate act or a crime gone wrong. It was slow, intentional, the kind of violence that forces you to stop and ask not just what happened, but how could someone even decide to do this? And I will be straight with you. I'm not going to get into graphic details, but because it doesn't matter, but because it does, the reality of it is already heavy enough. You will feel it without me spelling everything out. So, look, if you are listening late at night, maybe sitting alone, maybe the house is a little too quiet, just keep that in mind that this one sticks with you. Hey guys, it's Andrew. Welcome back to Every Town. And today we are heading to a place so small you could drive through it without realizing you have been there. Anna, Illinois, population around 2000. One stoplight, a barbecue spot called Uncle Joy's, where apparently you can get a fried Bolgana sandwich that people swear by, a gas station, a funeral home, then just open space. Fields stretching out in that way that make everything feel still, almost frozen. It's the kind of town where people know your name before you even introduce yourself. And for a long time, people didn't lock their doors. Not really, not seriously. Because why would you? But by the late 1980s, something had shifted. Not overnight, these things never do, but enough that people started noticing. Jefferson County had seen 15 homicides in just 2 years. Now, if you are thinking in terms of big cities, that might not sound like much. But here, in quiet farms, towns, and back roads, that number felt enormous. It changed things. People started double checking their locks. Shotguns stared a little closer. Conversation got quieter, more cautions. You know that feeling when everything's just off. But if you can't quite explain why, that was Anna. And right in the middle of all this, you had the Dardine family. Kath and Elaine Dardine had moved to Anna not long before everything happened. Kath was 29, working at a water treatment facility. Elaine was 30, commuting to Mount Vernon for her job at an office supply store. They had a 2-year-old son, Peter. And by the fall of 1987, Elaine was 7 months pregnant with their second child. They would already picked up out name, Ian. If it was a boy, Casey. If it was a girl, just normal life stuff. The kind of decisions you don't even think twice about. And that's the thing. There was nothing flashy about them, nothing dramatic. They went to church. Kath sang, Elaine played piano. They were not involved in anything shady. Didn't cause problems. didn't stand out. They were just steady, predictable. The kind of people you would trust just without really thinking about it. Kate especially was careful, like really careful. The kind of guy who would buy 50-cent sodas and resell them for a small profit at work, quietly saving every extra dollar for his son's future. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to, because that's how he thought. Always a few steps ahead, always planning. And yet, something was bothering him. Not in a loud, obvious way, more like it showed up in a small moments, the kind you almost miss if you are not paying attention. Keith had told this his mother he wanted to leave Anna, just pack up and go back to Mount Carmel, even if it is meant quitting his job and starting over. And when she asked him why, he didn't give some long explanation. He just said there were too many bad things happening. Too much violence, too much meanness. That word sticks with me. Meanness? It feels almost too simple for he was sensing. But maybe that's why it worked. And then there was this one moment, this small, almost forgettable thing that somehow says a lot. One night, a young woman knocked on that door asking to use the phone, and Kath don't let her in. Not because she seemed dangerous, not because of anything specific, just because he didn't feel safe opening the door. I don't know about you, but that hits in a weird way because it's such a small decision, and yet it tells you exactly where his head was at. By late 1987, they would put their mobile home for sale. They were actively planning to leave, start fresh somewhere that felt safer, quieter, somehow where they could breathe a little easier. But they never got the chance. On the morning of November 18th, Kat didn't show up for work, and that alone was enough to raise eyebrow. He was not the kind of guy who just didn't show up. No call, no explanation. That was not him. His supervisor tired calling again and again, no answer. And you know how that feeling creeps in. At first, it's just mild concern. Maybe something came up. Maybe there is some simple explanation. But as the hours passed, it started to feel heavier, harder to ignore. Eventually, the supervisor contacted Kath's parents. They had not heard from him either. And that's when things really started to shift from unusual to wrong. Kate's father had a spare key, so he drove down to Anna, meeting deputies from the sheriff's office, and together they went to the trailer. Now, this is the part of where everything changed. Inside, they found Elaine, Peter, and a newborn baby girl, all in the same bed. And for a second, just a second, it might be have looked like they were sleeping, arranged close together, covered almost peacefully. But they were not. They had all been murdered. And not quickly, not mercifully. Aline and Peter had been bound, beaten. Aline, 7th month pregnant, had gone into labor during the attack. The baby was born and then killed as well. I don't even know how to process that. Honestly, it's the kind of things your brain almost refuses to fully accept, like it just pushes back. What makes it even harder to understand is what the scenes looked like afterward. The trailer was clean, no sign of a struggle, No forced entry, nothing ransacked. A VCR is still sitting there, a cameraman, cash, jewelry, everything untouched. The back door was open, but that was it. This was not a robbery. Nothing had been taken. Whoever did this was not here there for money. And then there was no more things. Keith was gone. His car, a red 1981 Plymouth, was missing too. And at that point, with everything they knew, the first theory almost felt unavoidable. That Keith had done this. So something snapped, something broke, and he killed his family before fleeing. It sounds terrible to say out loud, but in that moment, it fit, or at least it fit more than anything else. A manhunt started almost immediately. Officers went to his mother's house, expecting to find him there, and she was adamant, absolutely adamant, that it couldn't be true, that her son would never do something like this. And look, I think most parents would say that. They would have to, but still, you can't help but feel the tensions in the moment between what people believe about someone and what the evidence seemed to suggest. Except the next day, everything changed again. Hunters were out in a field about a mile from the Dardine trailer when they came across something that didn't belong there. And you can kind of imagine it, right? Early morning, that quiet countryside stillness, maybe a little fog hanging low over the ground. The kind that makes everything feels muted. And then something breaks that calm. They found Keith. And just like that, the entire theory collapsed. He had not run, he hadn't snapped, he hadn't disappeared into the night after doing something unthinkable. He had been taken, executed, shot 3 times. Once in his skull, once through the face, and once through the cheek. And there was more done to him after that. The kind of details that investigators don't forget, even if they wish they could. So now the question was not, did Cat do this? It becomes, who did this to all of them? And almost immediately the case felt heavier, darker, because now you are not looking at a family tragedy anymore. You are looking at someone, or maybe multiple people, who came into the home and did this deliberately. Later that same day, Kate's car turned up, and this is one of those details that sticks with you, because it doesn't just add to the mystery, it kind of twists it. The red Plymouth was found parked outside the police station in Benton, not hidden, not abandoned, somewhere remote, just left there in plain sight, like someone wanted it to be found, like it was placed there was on purpose. Inside, the car was covered in blood. I mean, think about that for a second. Whoever did this threw a blood-soaked car directly to a police station, parked it right out front, then just walk away. No rush, no panic, no attempt to hide. That's not fear, that's confidence. Or worse, that's a message. And I don't know about you, but that details always gives me that uneasy feelings, like the person responsible was not committing a crime. They were making a point, something calculated, something controlled. Because nothing about his looked impulsive. Back at the trailer, investigators started piecing things together, and the more they looked, the stranger it got. The scene was too clean, not spotless, but controlled. There were no signs of a chaotic struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken door or window. It almost felt stacked, not in a theoretical way, but in a careful, deliberate one. The bodies had been arranged, covered, positioned close together, and that's the part of that really messes with your head because it suggests time. It suggests the person or people responsible didn't just rush in and out. They stayed, they looked their time, they made decisions after the violence was already done. That's not something you do in panic. That's something you do when you are calm. And honestly, that's harder to understand. Investigators quickly ruled out robbery. Nothing was taken, everything of value was still there. So, if was not about money, then what was it about? The questions become the center of everything because without a motive, you are just chasing shadows. They brought in around 30 detectives working full time. Over 100 people were interviewed. Nearly 150 pieces of the evidence collected, and still nothing solid. No clear suspect, no obvious connections, just fragments that didn't quite fit together. And the town felt it. You could almost feel the tension settling in, like a weight. People who used to leave their doors unlocked started checking them twice, then three times. Gun sales went up. Security systems started appearing in homes that had never needed them before. It is strange how quickly a place can change. One moment it's familiar, safe, predictable, and then something like this happening. Suddenly, everyone's looking at each other a little differently. You start wondering things you never used to wonder. Meanwhile, investigators dug deeper into case and alliance lives, trying to find anything that could explain this. Affair, financial troubles, gambling, drugs, nothing. It all came back clean. Toxicology reports showed no drugs or alcohol in their systems. Friends or family described them the same way every time, quiet, kind, ordinary. And I think that's what made this case so unsettling. There was no obvious reason, no warning sign, no explanation that made sense. So people starting filling in the blanks themselves. And this was the late 1980s, right in the middle of what people now call the Hispanic panic. Rumors spread fast back then, faster than fact. And for some people, the brutality of the crime felt like it had to mean something bigger, something ritualistic. The way Kate's body had been treated, the circumstance around Aline giving birth during the attack. To some, it seemed to fit a narrative they were already primed to believe. But investigators were not convinced. Experts were brought in. They were, and then they pushed back hard against the idea. Ritual killings, they explained, tend to follow pattern, symbol, marking, repeated behavior, something that communicates a message or belief system. None of that was present here. No symbol, no ritual object, no consistent pattern, just violence, deliberate control, and deeply personal. And that word, personal, kept coming up. The Franklin County coroner even said it felt that way. That whoever did this didn't choose the Dardines randomly. that it was not just a chance. But if it was personal, then who? Because no one had a bad word to say about them. And that's where things started to feel almost frustrating, because every theory sounds possible for a moment and then falls apart. Maybe it was mistaken identity. Maybe someone threw out they were targeting someone else. Maybe someone had a grudge we don't know about. Maybe Kath had crossed paths with the wrong person at the wrong time. Kath's mother even suggested years later that maybe someone had tried to involve him in something illegal, like selling drugs, and then he refused. Or maybe someone's had an interest in a line that was not returned, and it escalated into something violent. But there was no evidence for any of it, just possibilities. And then there is something timeline. All four victims died within about an hour, which raises a whole other set of questions. Because think about what that means. Someone had to control the situation at the trailer, binding Elaine and Peter, carrying out the take, cleaning the scene, arrange the body, and at the same time Kath was taken to completely different location about a mile away and killed there. That's a lot to do in a short amount of time, which lead to another theory. Maybe there was more than one person involved. And yeah, that could explain some things. One person stayed at a trailer. And yeah, that could explain some things. One person stayed at the trailer while another takes Kath. It makes the logistic easier, but it also complicates everything else, because now you are not just looking for one person with a motive. You are looking for multiple people who all agree to do something like this. And that's harder to wrap your head around. Even the FBI got involved, bringing in profilers to analyze the case, and what they found or didn't find was just as frustrating. It didn't fit. That was the conclusion. No clear patterns, no consistent behavioral police profile, no neat box you could put this into. Every lead pointed somewhere and nowhere at the same time. And that's the kind of case that keep investigators up at night. The kind that lingers because there is no clean narrative, no satisfying explanation, just questions and silence. Year passed like that. Lead dried up. The case went cold, but not for everyone. Because Kath's mother, John, she didn't let it go. And honestly, I don't think she could. She kept calling detective, asking for updates, sharing tips, anything she heard. She even tried to get national attention, collecting signatures to bring the story to bigger platform. She wanted people to know what happened, to remember. Because the worst part of something like this is not just that it happened. It's the idea that it could be forgotten, and that fear that this could all just fade away was real. Because that's what time does, right? It softens things, blurs the edge, people move, new families coming in, all stories stop being told, and eventually something that once shocked an entire town becomes just another file sitting on a shelf. But John wouldn't let them happen. Not if she could help it. She kept pushing, calling, asking, following up the anything that even felt like a lead. And I think there is something really human in that, That refusal to accept silence as an answer. Because when something like this happens, you don't just want justice, you want understanding, you want it to make sense, even if it never really can. The case didn't get some national attention eventually. Shows like America's Most Wanted covered it in 1998, hoping maybe someone there had seen something, remembered something, anything that could move things forward. But nothing came from it. No tips that led anywhere real, no breakthrough, just more awareness and more questions. And then in 1999, there was a moment, just a brief one, where it seemed like maybe things were about to change. Investigators started looking into a man named Angel Metrino Resendez. He was a serial killer who drifted across the country, often traveling by hopping freight train. His victims were usually people living near railroad track, and his method, extreme blunt force violence, had some similarity to what happened to the Dardine family. And the Dardine trailer, it was near railroad tracks. So for a moment it felt like a possible connection, like maybe all those scattered pieces were finally starting to line up. But they couldn't place him in Anna at the time of the murders. No proof, no physical evidence, nothing solid enough to hold on to. And just like that lead faded too. Then came another name, and this one stuck a little longer. Tommy Lynn Sales. He was arrested at the very end of 1999 in Texas after attacking two young girls. One of them didn't survive, then other did, and her account helped identify him. Sales was eventually convicted and sentenced to death, and once he was behind bar with nothing left to lose, he started talking a lot. He confessed to dozens of murders across the country, at one point claiming as many as 70. Investigators were able to confirm at least 22 of them, which already put him in a category that hard to even comprehend. A transient killer, a trans killer, no fixed location, no consistent pattern of victim beyond opportunity and vulnerability. So when his name came up in connection to the Dardine case, people paid attention because one proper it almost fit. Sales claimed it was responsible for the murder of Keith, Alan, Peter and baby Cassie. And at first that might sound like the answer, like finally after all these years there is a name you can attach to it, a face, someone to point to it and say, that's who did this. But the more he talked, the more complicated it got, because his story kept changing. In one version, he said that meet Keith at a truck stop or a pool hall. He was not consist about which. Claimed Keith invited him back to the trailer for dinner, and that something happened there that triggered a violent reaction. In another version, completely different, he said he had jumped off a freight train near Anna, noticed the for sale sign on the trailer, and approached the house pretending to be interested in buying it. Some ending, totally different beginners. Same ending, totally different beginnings, and that's a problem. Because when someone's telling the truth, especially about something this specific, the core details usually stay in the same. They don't shift depending on the day or the audience. And then there were details he got wrong. When investigators pressed him on things that he had never been made public, he struggled, gave incorrect answers, guessed, sometimes corrected himself after the fact. Now, to be fair, he did get something right. He mentioned watermelon themed ceramics inside the trailer, something that was not widely known. And for some investigators, that was enough to make them pause. Because how would he know that unless he would been inside? But other pointed out that a lot of those details had, in fact, appeared in media coverage over time, not necessarily front page stuff, but out there if you were paying attention. So was he remembering or just repeating? That questions never got a clear answer. Cell even different offered to take investigators back to Anna's and show them where he had hidden evidence. And for a moment, that sounded promising. Like maybe this was finally the break they needed. But there was a catch. Texas law didn't allow death row inmates to leave the state, so Linus investigators couldn't follow up on that offer. And just like that, another door closed. The state attorney in Jefferson County at the same time, Douglas Offerman, reviewed everything and made a decision. He said there were too many inconsistencies, not enough physical evidence, and without that, they couldn't move forward with charges. Sells remained a suspect. In fact, he was considered the primary suspect for a while, but legally it was not enough. And that's one of those frustrating realities, right? Because suspicion is not proof. A confession, even multiple confession, doesn't mean much if it doesn't hold up the under scrutiny. Sells maintained until his executions in 2014 that he was responsible, but the case is still unsolved, and that's where it stands today. More than 3 decades later, the files over 20 thick binders are still sitting with Jefferson County's Sheriff Office. DNA evidence from the victims has been preserved, tested, retested, but there is no unknown sample to compare it to. No match waiting in a database, just silence. And I think what makes the case linger is not just how brutal it was, it's how inexplicable it is. Because usually, even in the darkest case, there is something you can point to, a motive, a history, a thread that when you follow it lead you somewhere that at least makes sense on a human level. But there is nothing like that. This was not a family tangled up in something dangerous. They were not hiding secret or living on the edge of anything. They were doing everything right, planning ahead, saving money, getting ready to move somewhere safer, and still this happened. And I don't know, maybe that's the part of that sticks with me the most, because it breaks the quiet assumptions we all carry around, that if you are careful enough, if you make the right choice, if you avoid the wrong situation, you will be okay. Most of the time that's true, but not always. The case like this, they remind you of that in a way that's hard to shake. Anna eventually settled back into itself, at least on the surface. New people moved in, life continued, and if you go there now, you might not even hear about the Dardine family unless you are specifically looked for it. But that doesn't mean it's gone. Not really. Because something like this doesn't just disappear. It lingers in memory, in unanswered question. In that quiet space between what we know and what we will probably never understand. And maybe that's where the case will always live. Not solved, not explained, just remember. And honestly, sometimes that's the only things left to hold on to.